But as I've kind of gotten, or as I'm getting older and trying to like really navigate where I find happiness within making things, it's just making sure that I had a good time doing it. And that's really where like I've been, and it's still hard. It's still definitely a struggle. I expect it to be a struggle for pretty much ever, but I'm finding more and more that as long as I'm kind of following where I enjoy myself the most, truly, and you know, it takes some introspection to find that, but that's why I've kind of gone the more YouTube route.
My name is West Givens, and welcome back to the Tungsten Originals podcast. You just heard part of my conversation with filmmaker Kevin Plachy. We discussed becoming a filmmaker during the rise of social media, if the entertainment industry should take YouTube seriously, and his journey from fan to collaborator at The Valley Folk, a YouTube channel with over 250,000 subscribers. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Episode 70 of the Tungsten Originals podcast. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Hey, can I, West? That's your name. I want to
That's
just
me.
say,
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Like, do you know how cool your name is?
Oh, wow.
You have
Thank you.
such a great name.
Thank you. I appreciate
Like, did you
that.
get commented on your name at all?
I do. A lot of people think it's short. A lot of people think it's Wes without the T.
Yeah,
A lot of people
that's
think
what
it's
I think I
Wesley.
thought the first time.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people think it's short for Wesley, but it's just straight West. And I do have to
West.
say, even though I did nothing to obtain this name, I'm pretty proud of it.
Nice, good.
I'm
you
feeling
should
good
be.
about it. Yeah. Well, thank you. I want every
Yeah.
guest now to start the episode off complimenting me. I
Okay,
think that
yeah,
sets a
that
good,
should be a new
good
rule.
tone for the podcast. Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna get Martin Scorsese, and he's gonna be like, "Hey, I love your work, man."
Yeah, exactly. I saw that short film you made when you were 14, and I was really blown away. Kevin, this is really exciting. You are involved in some of my favorite YouTube channels and just projects online and stuff that I consume on basically a daily basis. You work at The Valley Folk, which is an amazing like online kind of sketch comedy, but it's so much more than that, and I'm sure we'll dive into that YouTube channel. The Dynamic Banter podcast, which is by far my favorite podcast, and so many other great projects that you've been a part of. And so I'm excited to dive into your work with those lovely people and all that kind of stuff. But before we get there, I want to dive into how you got started into filmmaking. So I feel like you're one of those people that's been making stuff forever. So how did this start becoming a part of your life?
I mean, it's totally the classic story, dude, of just I found I don't know. There was like I've chalked it down to like there's 3 different moments that I say kind of shaped me fully wanting to do this. And it was the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes featurettes, which if anybody has seen the extended editions of those, and I mean, so many filmmakers have probably watched those just because they're hailed as being so great.
Right.
So those, and then I guess like I saw on YouTube, because I would always play with my Legos and my Bionicle toys as a kid, like just like I would just make up little action scenes with them all the time, just in my head. And then when I went onto YouTube and discovered YouTube, I saw that there was videos of like Bionicle stop motion things that people were putting to music, and that was another moment where I was like, wow, that is the coolest thing ever. I want to do this somehow. And then just my dad, I guess, being he's a very creative person. He works in sound for TV shows and stuff. So he like knows that world. And he kind of introduced me to, great shows, great music, great movies. And I think those 3 things just were like, they all came to me probably when I was like 7 or 8, or even just growing up with those kind of things happening. I just all of a sudden started doing it myself because I was just like, this seems so fun. This seems so great. This feels like taking so many creative things and pushing it into one. It's just, yeah, I love that about it.
Whenever you were like moving along and making stuff more seriously, like when did you get to the point where you're like, I want to pursue this professionally?
It was probably young. I guess
Yeah.
it was. I truly don't remember that moment happening. It was almost like I just started making videos, and if I didn't really get asked, I bet, or at least I didn't think about like, what do I want to be when I grow up, when I was like 10, 11, 12. I just was kind of like, I just like making videos right now with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think just throughout those weeks and years of doing that, it just kind of was like, oh, well, I guess this is what I'll be doing, because you can do a job and you can make a living with this. And then the explosion of the internet opened so many opportunities for anybody creative doing, especially just anything videos wise, art wise. That opened such a big field of jobs. So when that kind of was all happening as I was growing up, it was like, well, this could totally be a thing. This is becoming a huge thing.
I think that is something that's really interesting about like our age group of filmmakers, but also just like creators and people who make things artistically in general, because you go back 20 years ago now and filmmaking was so expensive, like it was not obtainable, like you had to have a ton of money, and and so now, and then like whenever we're starting to figure out that we want to make things, like all of a sudden we see these people getting millions of people are watching them make things, and they're just like dudes with cameras and friends like making stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like,
and that's awesome.
You would have had
I love that.
You would have. I love that too. It's so, I love it, but at the same time, I think I do have some like, would it be better because those, like you said, 20 years ago, you would have a job, like a side job as like a cashier, to earn money to be able to develop your film for like 1 8-minute scene. Like, it was like, that was your mindset. So I think it was taken so much more, I don't know, like, I feel like people just had more like concentration and passion and like meticulousness. What is that word? With films and stuff. Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where you have to plan for years and raise funds and stuff. And now you can get your phone and go make something on the weekend and stuff. Yeah, that's exactly. I think that's a really good point. So I was watching, as I said, before we started recording, I looked back at your YouTube channel, which is linked in the description. Y'all should definitely go check it out and watch his amazing videos. Yeah, but you've made some awesome videos about like how you started working at the Valley Folk, and what your first year working there was like, and just these videos that I love to go back to and I've watched multiple times. And you talked about how you started watching YouTube in like 2008. And there's, I feel like, not a more perfect time to start, because YouTube was like you said in the video, they weren't even called YouTubers then, like it was the wild west of YouTube that we all miss. So, talk about finding SourceFed and how that like molded you, and kind of, I feel like in a lot of ways that's kind of the first domino piece that like led you to where you're like working today. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like,
and I wouldn't,
beautiful way.
Yeah. And it's so, I mean, we can get into that too, of that whole like dream job idea. Like I wasn't, SourceFed, if anybody doesn't know, was like a big YouTube channel back in the day that had millions of subscribers, and then it got canceled because their main head of the company kind of just said, we're going to cancel it. And it was kind of like, oh no, crap. But yeah, I mean, me and West were both fans of SourceFed. So and that was the thing, is that I never saw SourceFed and said, that's what I want to do. I saw SourceFed and said, those are great, funny people. I was more looking at things like Julian Smith. He was an old YouTuber.
Yeah.
I was looking at people who were doing more filmmaking sketches, but also in the YouTube world, who had respect for YouTube. And I think that like those types of people kind of just made me realize that YouTube is I think, and I could be generalizing this, but I think YouTube gets a bad rap from a lot of filmmaking people. I think, and even I fall myself into thinking this at times.
Right. Right.
Just that YouTube is like a step down from filmmaking type of thing. And I agree that it's different. It's definitely a different realm, but it's not. There's people who enjoy doing it that way as much as people who enjoy making films without like going through a film festival circuit and things like that. And I think that was like this slow realization for me as I was watching these different YouTube people making their things, and then also seeing movies and being like, well, these, I kind of like the idea of YouTube better. It seems more free. It seems more like
Yeah.
community based. And that was all stuff that I latched onto. I just liked the format. I think it was probably an age thing, just that like I fell perfectly to grow up with that. So that's what felt near and dear to my heart.
Right.
And yeah, then, you know, kept on making videos just on myself. And then, I mean, by myself with friends sometimes. And then, I mean, probably around like 17, 18 was when I was like, I guess I should really start taking this super seriously in terms of like, how can I make this my job? How can I make a living off of this? Um, I mean, then we could get into the whole story of how I got the job too, but I don't know how
Yeah,
far you
I
want
would.
to.
I want to go. I want to go all in. I want to dive head first because
Yeah.
I've. It's such a cool story to me, and it's like I kind of want to live vicariously through you whenever I like watch the video because it's
Aw.
such a cool. Like it's such a cool full circle thing. But before you tell the story, I do want to explain a little bit more about SourceFed because
Totally,
I
totally.
people that I like my friends, they don't really know about SourceFed, and it's something that is like even though it was canceled in 2017 and like had its life and everything, it is something that is like locked into my brain that is forever a part of me. And it's, it's like, it's just so hard to describe like what the people at SourceFed were
Yeah.
able to create in the community they were able to build. And so I'd love for you to just give a taste of like, of why we were so attached to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, SourceFed it started with three different hosts, Joe, Lee, and Elliot. They were three hosts, and they pretty much did like news. They would, tell you articles behind like a white wall, and they made it comedy. They made it fun. They made it themselves. They weren't just like giving the news facts. They made sure they got their information right, but they did it in a very fun way. They did it in a very creative way. They utilized the crew, so they would talk back and forth with crew, and it was just this very, I'll say it, YouTube feel of the
Yeah.
news type of thing. And they also then just started doing like, because you fell in love with these personalities of these hosts just like you do with
Hmm.
any show, and they started doing like where they would react to comments from the viewers. They would do like truth or dare from the viewers, and it exploded to like, they did video game news. They had a different channel for that, and then they had like a
Hmm.
sketch channel from SourceFed. So they kind of just were creatives. The whole team was just a bunch of creatives who, I mean, formed a family really in terms of the community because they interacted so well with the community. They cared about the fans. And I think that it was rare, or it's rare now to find that
Hmm.
with YouTube, that type of warm family feel. I would say now when I look at big YouTubers, I see fans. I see fans
Yeah.
of certain people, whereas SourceFed and I think, Rhett and Link have this also type of feel. Um, it's a family. It's a community. It's like you guys are just as great as us, and we could get along just as cool as you are. Like they just felt like normal people.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean that's what SourceFed was, and it went on for I don't even what was it. 8, 9 years, 10 years.
Yeah, not long
Yeah,
enough.
and
Something like
yeah,
that.
and then it just got kind of canceled out of the blue. I mean, they still
Yeah.
had a good following, and it just one day was like, we this is gonna be no more, and then it ended.
Yeah.
And then there was four original hosts from SourceFed, and a year and a half went by, I think ish. And
Yeah.
those four
Yeah.
hosts from the original SourceFed started their own company, the Valley Folk, which is who I'm a part of now. So that's kind of where SourceFed ties into all of this, why we're talking about it.
Right, exactly. Right. I think also one way that they were able to build that community is because of how weird it was. You had
Oh
to have a
yeah,
really specific sense of humor to like their
totally, man.
stuff. And so, like you were saying with fans, like, I love MKBHD videos, but if I met someone and
Yes,
they like MKBHD videos, it's like I wouldn't really, I'd be like, yeah, we like tech, but like, I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know if
yeah,
I could like get along with them. I meet someone who likes SourceFed and I'm like, we get each other. We're both messed up in the
totally.
same way.
Yes,
We can hang out. You know what I
that's a
mean?
great way. Yeah, I mean, like it was like you were just a best friend with this person simply because you knew you liked SourceFed together. Like it just went so deep into that.
And so, like you said, SourceFed gets canceled, and like, I mean, the community is just like totally devastated. They did this week of like the last hurrah week, and they had this big live stream
Yeah,
at the
the
end and
last
brought on old
videos.
hosts and stuff. Yeah. And it was really emotional. Like there again, that was like the closest emotional connection I had formed with any kind of creator and I was just
Yeah.
it was just like this cathartic experience that we were all going through, and it was so interesting. And then I remember seeing the four hosts, like they all changed their profile pictures on like Twitter to like the different parts of the Valley Folk logo, and I was like, oh, something's
Oh
brewing.
wow, that's
And
great.
I got really excited. And then
Yeah.
they announced the Valley Folk. Yeah, yeah, I remember it vividly. And so then, like you said, they announced the Valley Folk, and it's kind of like what the SourceFed fans like felt they were missing for a while. So,
Hmm.
and yeah, now you're working for them, which is just still so cool to me. But to even go
Yeah.
back a little bit, like I think the way you became an employee there, and more than an employee, a creative partner, because are so influential on the style of things, is it's you didn't like imply to a LinkedIn posting or an Indeed posting. You
No.
like had a back and forth with them over years, and that is also fascinating to me. So I'd love for you to dive into that story a little bit.
I mean, it's fascinating for me too, man, and I still like it's so the whole imposter syndrome thing. Like I feel like the
Oh
way
yeah,
like the way it happened for me like just escalates that feeling so much because it just feels so like this was such a weird way to get a full-time job like doing this.
yeah,
But I mean, two of the SourceFed hosts, or one of them, and then his friend Mike Falzone and Steve Zaragoza, started a podcast after or I guess it was going on while SourceFed was going on.
I think
They
so.
started a
Yeah,
podcast, called Dynamic Banter, and I loved that. Was a huge fan of Dynamic Banter. Watched every episode, and then throughout the years of them making that, I was kind of just making my own things, trying to just get better, essentially, trying to figure out what I like to do, which I still am figuring out. And then they came up with like a bit, because it's like a comedy podcast, so they do a bunch of bits like where they'll just create funny characters and stories in the podcast. And one of the bits was like about like a little pig, and I thought it was hilarious. And like as I was listening to it, I was kind of just like imagining what was happening. And then I thought, I'm gonna make this into a video. I'm gonna just try and make this into something, because it just seems fun, and it seems like something that I could actually pull off. So I did that, and then sent it in, or like tweeted at Steve and Mike in the podcast, and like Steve messaged me back, like retweeted all the like social media stuff, which I just thought was great. I was like,
right,
whoa, this is so
right.
like, it was like a very connection to an art piece that felt very real to me. And then like they talked about it on the podcast. And in my head I was just like, wow, that's so cool that my work just got to these people that I like and they enjoyed it so much. Like that was my feeling then. And then like I did a couple like before in January of 2018. Steve messaged me on Twitter just saying like how would you feel about like making a bunch of those dynamic banter skits, and I could even throw you some cash to like help you make them stuff type of deal. And
that must have been pretty crazy.
That was like the first moment of like, oh my gosh, what the heck is happening? Because again, like it wasn't like I like had some big crew to make, because you know Steve and Mike, you know, as much as they are YouTube, they still have a lot of professional experience. They still are
totally.
They know how sets work, they know all that type of stuff. And so when a kid just with his camera makes a stupid skit with a pig with himself, it just feels like it doesn't feel real. That like, okay, why do you want me to make something? But you know, of course I still was just thrilled to do it. And for that, you know, he started the Valley Folk around that same time. So the Valley Folk was kind of becoming a production house type of feel as I was making more of these dynamic banter skits. So I made a few more of those, and then through like a message with Steve, I was just like, if Valley Folk ever needs an extra hand with stuff, let me know. I'd love to help out type of thing. And that kind of just, I guess like that, he knew then that I would be interested in it, and then also saw the work that I was doing and liked it enough, and they liked it enough to where then it led to like, you know, I still had like an interview. I still met with them to like make sure I wasn't some crazy guy,
an insane person. Yeah. Exactly.
But you know, then it was like, yeah, you're hired type of deal. And that was just, again, I remember coming into the room the first time. I don't think Steve was there. I'd already met Steve. But I remember coming to the office like before in like the pre-interviews to meet these 3 original SourceFed hosts who I had watched forever, only seen on screen, to talk about a job with them. It was just like, I mean, yeah, it's truly hard to describe the feeling, because it's just like, because as much as I would like to say, you know, it was so exciting and happy for me, I'm such an anxious person that I was just like terrified. I was just terrified being there, you know?
Right. You don't
like,
want to mess up. What if you
and,
say the wrong thing and you're fired the next day or something?
Totally. Yeah, you want to be liked and stuff. That's what my attitude is, unfortunately, too much sometimes. But yeah, so that, you know, and then I started and kind of hit the ground running there, as fast paced as I've ever felt before.
I also like, I'm glad you pointed out the fast paced thing, because that's another like way that I think YouTube can stretch a muscle that quote unquote traditional filmmaking can't. Because like with SourceFed, I mean, they were doing at one point, I think like multiple daily uploads, like multiple uploads a day.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so they
didn't
get to
they
the
do
office
5 videos a day, I think.
I think it was 5.
Yeah.
That was their like 20 minutes or
yeah.
less thing, I think.
Totally.
Early on.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is just like insane to think that they get to the office at like crack of dawn, and then they find a story, record, and then it's edited, and then it's out by like 9 a.m. or whatever
that day.
And so then you compare that to, like I was telling you, I'm about to film Blueberries. I started writing Blueberries over 2 years ago, and we've been in pre-production for, I mean, of course, with COVID for a super long time. And it's just like, you know, then we do all these months and months and months of prep work and fundraising and all this kind of stuff. And then you're on set, and then you will be on set for 45 days. And then we will be editing for weeks and weeks and weeks. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So like, not that one is more valid than the other or whatever, but like, I think that quickness is a really good muscle to work, because it just
Totally.
makes you like a better problem solver, like in the moment.
That's exactly, I mean, if I were to tell, or if you were to ask, what's something that I've learned from Valley Folk, that's 100% like one of the top things is that.
Yeah.
And coming from somebody who, even if I were to go right now after working with the Valley Folk so long and make something completely on my own, I know I would take so much more time on it, just because that's in my nature. So again, coming from that attitude of where I would spend weeks and weeks and weeks, shot listing, planning all the details of these videos that I was doing, and then to go into a job that every day was like, okay, we're going to get the script and we're going to read it in the morning, and then we're going to shoot that day, and then after I'm done shooting, I'm going to start editing. And it like that was, again, it was tough. It was very hard to like be like, it felt as if like, I don't know how this can be good if I'm not spending so much time on it. And having that switch, I think as, you sound like this as well. And I think a lot of filmmakers are perfectionism, at least people who are in the world of like wanting to direct and do produce, these a little bit higher up job things. We have this idea of like perfectionism, totally. Like, I don't want this to mess up. I want this to be as good as possible. And YouTube is a place where I think that you have to bend that a little bit and understand that it doesn't have to be as good as possible. It just needs to be decent and get out there.
Right.
Which I think finding a good balance with that idea is the best, I think. And for some people who make stuff on YouTube so often, even once a week, like sketches, those people have found a way to work in which, doing it in that way fulfills them. They don't have to spend as much time. And again, it's not any less valid. It's more just that, some
different.
people, it's just different. Some people need that extra time to be like, I think I want to make sure that this is good. But, going back to how I was saying it was such a cool thing that I learned is, since I was such a person that spent so much time thinking before I could do action, before I would make and go for it, this kind of showed me like, hey, you don't have to think quite as much as you are, and just go for it, and you will figure it out as you're doing it.
I think another way that YouTube, like something that it has taught me and what I've consumed on YouTube and like how I've heard other creators talk about it, is YouTube emphasizes the importance of sharing something.
Yeah.
I know many filmmakers that have a short film on a hard drive and it's just not done, or it needs like a color grading tweak, or they just don't want to share it. Because I have films that I made years ago and now I'm way better, and I'm like, I don't know if I want anyone to see that, because I don't want them to think that that is how good I am currently. You know what I mean? Which is like fair, but what is the point if no one sees it? You know what I mean? Like, I think that is one of the ways that filmmaking is such an interesting art form, is that it is so reliant on an interaction with another person. It's so reliant on an audience. Like, I'm probably going to sound like I'm talking out of my ass, but like, if you're at a museum and there's a painting, like, if you don't get the painting or whatever, like, that's okay. Like, people, I think in a way, painters are painting for themselves, kind of, not in like a selfish way, but that's just how I associate the art form. As filmmakers, we are thinking about the audience like all the time. Like, what if they don't get this? What if this doesn't make sense to the audience? It makes sense to me. What if it doesn't make sense to them? So that is, I love, like, I want to always have that mindset of, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. And if this one thing isn't perfect, well, the great thing about YouTube is you can just post again. You just keep making it.
You just keep putting it up. And it's like, and that, like, I think trying to, if that's not ingrained into you, trying to learn that and like accept that is difficult. And just, I mean, like you said, and I find it funny because I totally agree with you on the filmmaking to feel that sense of like accomplishment a little bit of like, wow, I just made something type of deal. the full, I guess, like the full feeling of that. There's kind of a difference. I have like two feelings whenever I'm like working on a project, and it's one, once I get to a place where am watching it and I can feel from it, like I'm like, whoa, this is actually making me feel something. And as I'm
Right.
watching the thing that I made, that's like one aspect of why I love doing it. And then the second aspect is when the audience reacts to it, connects to it. And I
Mhm.
think to get that connection, I hear like filmmakers say like, "Oh, I just made this for myself," type of thing. And I think that if that was the case, you would have written it and then that would have been it or something. I think that
Right.
filmmaking does require almost like a little bit of a validation from an audience to feel like, and I think it's hard to say that because it's like you don't want to be like, I don't need people's validation to feel good about my art, you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
you do
But
want
I
a little
do.
bit of, yeah, you want that connection to happen. It's mostly about that, yeah, connection with the audience.
Like you can have a premiere of a film and you can know in your heart that it's good and you did the best you can. And then if everyone walks out and they're just like, I would be devastated.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
at least I
I
would
would be
rather you hate
confused. I
it.
would be like, yeah, yeah.
What did I do?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd rather people come out like, oh, that was the worst thing ever, than just being like, I mean, it was, it's whatever.
It
That would just be
totally,
terrible.
yeah.
It's a nightmare. Man, I gotta say, I'm really, really excited to be talking about this side of filmmaking because
Yeah.
I really toy with this like either or kind of mindset. Like as I build Tungsten, Tungsten is like
Yeah.
the goal, like a production company makes shorts, hopefully one day features, music videos, that kind of stuff. But like I said
Totally.
earlier, that YouTube part of my brain like is so, it affects how I create things and how I think. And like I watch YouTube way more than I watch movies or TV shows or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like it's
Agreed.
what I consume. And so I never want to leave it. And it's also interesting that I went to like a traditional film school and learned the
Mm-hmm.
traditional forms of filmmaking, the 3-act structure, and like how to set up a C-stand and all this stuff that I'm so glad that I was able to learn. But like, man, in a sense, I throughout this whole thing, I've like throughout going to film school and how we were taught and stuff, I just kind of want to be like, we're missing a huge part of the puzzle. And
Yeah.
that's just posting it online. And like
Yes.
you said, I think a lot of people don't take that seriously because right next to your short film that you worked for 2 years on, there can be like a slime video right next to you that has more views and stuff.
I mean, that's where it gets very difficult because, YouTube, just to say YouTuber is such a broad term nowadays. It's like the amount of things that fall into that are insane. And I think, that I still toy with that. I think that getting my job has pushed me farther into why I do love the YouTube world and the digital content world more. But I was in a film school as well, before I got this job, and that's what made me drop out because it was like, well, I got a full-time job now. I'm just gonna have to I'm just gonna take this, and I was learning just those same things, and I think that in a way, I'm someone, and I think there's a lot of people out there that, probably including you, that can really appreciate a YouTube person who involves aspects of filmmaking, in
Yeah.
terms of a good storyline or good editing or good cinematography, good acting. But I mean, that's kind of different. The acting's where the whole thing kind of gets weird with YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah.
But who appreciates the production side of filmmaking, but then also sees the beauty in how personal and how real, quote unquote, because it's not definitely everybody, but how real YouTube can feel. And when somebody can
Mhm.
kind of implement those two things together with YouTube, I think that's where I find the most joy and like most like connection from. But it's still, I mean, like for me, the way I've kind of approached that is I go after what I'm having the most fun with, I guess, because
Totally.
I found that with going on sets and doing that type of thing, being in that world, running film festivals and stuff, I started to attempt to do all that, and I just wasn't having fun. I felt like I was dreading it more than I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Like, I loved making the thing, but like all the other stuff, and just like sometimes the level of production that sometimes people think you need to make something good, in that world is like insane.
Yeah.
And I just don't enjoy that as much. Again, there's some people who do, who love that world and love the being like in that big production set type of feel. I just am finding more that I don't have as much fun in that way. I have more,
Right.
and I could say that I want to make the coolest, best looking thing and everything like that. But as I've kind of gotten, or as I'm getting older and trying to like really navigate where I find happiness within making things, it's just making sure that I had a good time doing it. And that's really where like I've been, and it's still hard. It's still definitely a struggle. I expect it to be a struggle for pretty much ever, but I'm finding more and more that as long as I'm kind of following where I enjoy myself the most, truly,
Yeah.
and it takes some introspection to find that, but that's why I've kind of gone the more YouTube route. It's just, yeah.
And I think to go back to the conversation about people who like balk at YouTube or don't take it seriously and stuff, Peter McKinnon is as a filmmaker and photographer. He made a really great video that I'll link in the description of this episode that y'all should check out.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. It's relatively recent. It's about, he got an opportunity to direct an ad for Hyundai in Canada, like Hyundai, like a big, huge car commercial. And this guy is quote unquote, I think it's called Just a YouTuber or something like that. I think that's what the video is called. And it just dives into this whole idea of like, people don't take it seriously. Yet when you look at someone like Peter McKinnon, like, I'm once Blueberry's done, I'm going to put a reel together, and then I'm going to update my website and make sure it's all like super presentable and stuff. And, all this kind of stuff. Peter McKinnon, you can go and see what he's capable of in 30 seconds. You know what I mean? It's right there.
Yep.
And yes, that is of course doable with people like who have updated reels and stuff. Like that is of course possible when you make your own website.
Yeah.
But his portfolio is publicly available, and you can see as like a potential hire, or as like Hyundai, the people who are in charge of figuring that out, you can see that audiences are connecting already. So like the proof is there.
Yes.
Like he's already proved himself as a filmmaker, and that is something that is really, really attractive to me, is that you don't have to get festival laurels, or you don't have to, whatever it is, get these awards and all this kind of stuff. Like, the most important thing about all of filmmaking, no matter where you put it, is people seeing it. That's at the core of what we do, is all we want. We want people to see it and to connect with it. And like I was telling you again before we recorded, the episode that came out today, but it's last episode before yours, was with Justin Robinson, who is a quote unquote traditional filmmaker, but he's been active in like the YouTube world with Film Riot, and he made this documentary called My Brother Jordan, put it up on YouTube because he finished it when festivals were closing down and the world was crazy. It caught wave on the YouTube algorithm and became a trend on TikTok. 15 million views on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
There's the proof.
And
I mean, in my mind, I'm like, it's valid. That's the proof right there.
Totally. But I mean, like, that goes back to, wait, is that Justin, the one
Justin
that was
Robinson.
like in sketches on Film Riot?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I gotta check that out. That's awesome.
I'm very excited. He was awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, like it goes back to like how we were saying how broad the term YouTube is. I think thinking YouTube does have a big cloud over it of like vlogs and like cheesy editing, stupid little, a kid with his toy channel, something like that. Like you said, the slime videos. It has all this crap that's like in this cloud. But there's also another little piece in there that is filmmaking, like, vibes, you know? And you can see, like, you can see that somebody could make a movie. Like, you could see a YouTuber. I can see somebody like Peter McKinnon making a movie, making a commercial type of thing. And there's,
Totally.
you know, Film
Yeah.
Riot, Ryan and him is like, you can see them making movies because, but that's also what I want to say with this is that, you know, Peter McKinnon as well, in terms of doing YouTube, it wasn't like he just posted, like vlogs that were done in a travel way. He still definitely
Right.
brought his own style, his own
Mm-hmm.
take on things. He went even into like teaching you things. He went into that whole world to kind of build his channel up and get his, you know, get eyes on him. Because I think that, you know, you do have, if you're gonna choose to do YouTube, you have to think of it a little bit, you know, like you said, getting people to see it. And a lot of people might not just see it if you just title it like some art name of, you know, like, I don't
Exactly.
know, like if I made whatever,
Like Blueberries.
Boyhood.
Or,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you can't, it's hard to find that. But let's say you made tons of videos that were more YouTube focused that were still done well. You could still make them look great, but their just theme of them isn't so niche. It's like more like broad that everybody can like, oh, I can find this person through it. That's kind of how you build up the audience, and then you have this audience that appreciates your work, and then you hit them with this short film or this cool commercial product
Right.
that like gets a millions of views and gets spread around, and then it's like, okay, this guy can totally do this. But again, it's
Right.
a choice you have to make. You can't just be like, I'm just gonna make something and put it up once a month and hope that it blows up. It's like you gotta
Right.
like
Exactly.
make it your job, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is like the side of the coin. That's kind of like the reality setting in part of the coin is the fact that YouTube is insanely saturated, and making money on it can be really difficult and can take years. So like
Yes.
that is certainly something that people have to consider if they're looking at it from that perspective of like, I'm going to make this a full-time career. But on that Peter McKinnon video, I think MKBHD, Marquez Brownlee, commented on it and said like, all roads lead to YouTube. And I'm sure like most of those other guys probably wish they were YouTubers too. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably really true, because I'm sure that there are people that are so tired of pitching ideas to studios and getting turned down, or having a studio come in and say like, change this thing or whatever. And the beauty of YouTube is you do it yourself. And that is something
Yes.
that I love so much, is like, if you can, and again, like short films are expensive. I'm trying to raise $5 more right now for Blueberries. Like I am
yeah.
well aware of the, by the way, check out the fundraiser in the description of this episode.
Go.
Yeah, go. please. But you know, it's difficult. Like whenever it's way nice when a studio comes in and gives you $500,000 to make something. But man, that feeling of doing it yourself with your friends and just putting it out there on your own.
Yeah.
Love it. I want to channel
You know
that.
what I think about too is that why a little bit, and maybe this is kind of coming to me now, so I could be talking crap, but like, do you think that the way, like, I wonder myself if a majority of the movies that were coming out in Hollywood that big studios were making, if the majority of them were more indie feeling, were more like, you know, these old films that we remember seeing, like, I wonder, would I be more inclined to go that route? Because I feel like YouTube has kind of become this new place of where these indie feelings, these very just like raw, you know, videos, short films are appearing. And since that is a thing, it's like almost like, you know, when these big time directors that are directing big things now, it's like when they started, they were pretty much doing what YouTubers are doing, but it was just like they didn't have an audience to give it to. I mean, like that's what I totally would think that like Spielberg and Edgar Wright and, you know, Martin Scorsese, like we said, they would be, I mean, I don't know about Martin Scorsese, but I feel like they would be I feel like they would be posting things to YouTube if it was there when they were growing up.
I'm imagining Martin Scorsese being like, "What is up, guys? Welcome back."
Dude,
This video is brought to you by
please.
Honey. Go to honey.com/Scorsese. I'm going to have to get that drawn up or something.
He'd be like the nerd writer who just does like film essays and stuff.
Totally.
Like that.
I think in that same discussion that there can be a huge disconnect between those big filmmakers and the audience, because I mean, these are people like who are huge celebrities and like don't live a normal life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And their audience are normal people. Like you watch the Oscars and you're like, man, I relate to none of these people. But of course, their stories aren't necessarily about them, so they can write characters that we can of course relate to. But that is like what drew me to SourceFed. I watched Joe, Elliot, Lee, and Steve, and I'm like, these are real people who are being honest with me, and they're not bullshitting me, and they're like talking to me like I'm a person, and I feel like I can like hang out with these people. You know what I mean? And it's of course the same thing is carried over with the Valley Folk and Dynamic Banter and all them. Like, I think that is something that you should never, as you get that success and move up in your career and stuff, like you need to always remember where you started. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that you're just a human. You're not better than anybody just because. Yeah, you're not better just because you're, you know, fame. I mean, it goes back to the dangers of fame and, you know, success in that way.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see it happen with YouTubers that get too famous and they lose their mind. I mean, it's like,
totally.
But there is people out there, and I think it's rare and hard to find now, but it's there. And that's why I think I still continue doing it. And once I completely lose sight of it is when I'll probably stop. But there's people out here who have that authenticity, and there's people who have that, you know, they don't, you know, you put on a little bit of a face to make sure you don't just, but in the same way that you do when you see your friend, it's like you
totally.
Yeah. And you just, it's so much more real and so much more, I don't know, just connecting and entertaining in a way of just like, wow, I can just chill with these people.
Yeah, exactly. And that, the first time, or I guess I should say the only time we've gotten to meet in person was when the Valley Folk had a show in Brooklyn. It was my first time ever coming to New York, was that trip.
Same for
my
me,
sister
dude.
lives here. Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
My sister has lived in New York for a few years. I'm subleasing her apartment. This is my sister's apartment. Everyone enjoy. And so it was like a trip to visit her and come see the show. And I went there alone, like, which is, ask my girlfriend, ask any of my friends. I don't do that. I don't go to places alone. It's not me. So I tweeted out, I was like, hey, I'm going to the show alone, I need friends. And like Steve retweeted it and Elliot retweeted it, and I had all these people saying like,
wonderful.
come find me. And I made friends there, and it was that's such a cool
great
experience. Yeah. And so seeing them, like watching them run out, they were holding a bunch of pizzas and they were going to give out pizza, and they only had like one pizza, but it was such an interesting,
for
like
300 people.
Whoa. Yeah, exactly. In this cramped room, they have one pizza for every single human in there. I think I remember Steve being like, ah, shit, that's not enough, and just like running away like he would do, you know? But it wasn't a feeling of like, oh, that is a celebrity I like. They are someone who lives a life that I will never live or whatever. It was like, oh, I haven't seen these guys in so long.
Yes.
I'm finally getting to meet my friends.
A very old
old
friend that you haven't seen in a while. Yes.
Exactly. And then I got to ask them a question. Like, they had 2 lines.
I remember
for a
this,
Q&A. Dude. Yeah. I remember it very vividly because I was the last person to ask a question. I was like, please call on me. Please call on me. Just like freaking out. And it's whenever Tungsten was just an idea in my head, and hadn't started the podcast because I was late 2018. We started the podcast 2019.
Yeah.
And the podcast is when I consider like the beginning of Tungsten, kind of. That's when we started making stuff and posting stuff. And I'm like, I give them a letter. Joe immediately takes the letter and like throws it down and like stomps on it, which was hilarious. And I I tell them how important they were. I think I said like you can draw a direct line from me watching my first source code video to the person that I am today, and that's so true. That's like very from the
Yeah,
heart.
that's
And then I
lovely.
was like, I would love to interview you guys, and Steve goes, "Now?" I'm like,
uh,
"Yeah, right now is perfect." But man, they're just so like I honestly was worried, like, they say don't meet your heroes. I was worried they were going to be like assholes or it was all going to be a show or whatever. And then they did a meet and greet, got pictures with every single
yeah,
person. They stayed for like hours after to get pictures with everybody. And I got to interact with them a little bit and I was like, they're exactly how they seem. And it was just such
yeah,
a
yeah.
warm, like it still makes me feel fuzzy inside because I watched them for years and I just never thought that I would get to see them. And like I said, being in New York for the first time, being at like a gathering alone, which I don't do, it
Yeah,
was just
it
like
was
a
just such a big
swell of
moment. Oh, I love
emotions.
that.
And then I
Yeah.
met you and I was like, oh, hey. And you're like, oh, you're a filmmaker. You get it. And so it was, yeah, it was just so, what a
uh,
crazy moment that was.
yeah. I mean that trip was so just huge. Another aspect of YouTube is that you don't have a live sense of an audience. So when you go into a
Right.
room and there's
Exactly.
300 people that are screaming, it's like, whoa, this is actual real thing.
Yeah.
Like this is big type of thing. Yeah, I mean that was a wonderful time.
And they premiered the Santa Steve video for that year, and that
Yeah.
was awesome. That was so so cool. Loved that.
And dude, like again, going back to like spur of the moment, like they didn't even know that they were going to play that until like maybe 8 hours before the show. And
Oh
then
wow.
literally like while we were probably like an hour while we were like getting set up and doing stage tests and everything like that was when I forgot
Yeah,
who it
yeah.
was, but somebody got the idea like, hey, we should order a pizza and bring it out onto stage. So it was like within, 30 minutes, we had to call and get a pizza delivered. And then it was like, okay, we're just going
Yeah.
to do this now. And that's just how spur of the moment some of these things are. Again, just keeping you you're on your feet, you're ready to go for whatever's going to happen next. It's different, but enjoyable still.
Man, we've been talking about SourceFed and the Valley folks so much. I'm loving this. I feel like I could talk about them for hours. I do want
Hell
to
yeah.
dive in more into like the videos that you have made on your personal channel and Valley folk
Yeah.
stuff, like the bigger Valley folk projects and your editing style, because I think that's something that myself and the general Valley folk dynamic banter cinematic universe community
Yeah. Yeah.
appreciate and like recognize as in the quality of your work is your editing, because you
Yeah.
are really talented at taking a lot of footage from different sources that talk about different topics and all this kind of stuff and creating an emotional through line and really making you feel something. Like I said, I watched your video, and this is all linked in the description, your video about how you got the Valley Folk, your first year video, like your first
Yeah.
year at the Valley Folk video, and then your COVID like lockdown video.
Yeah.
And I've watched all those multiple times and they still, I'm not saying any of this to just like gas you up or whatever, but they still make me really feel something that a lot of other things doesn't. It's like you're really good at making the audience feel something. And that is, we're talking about YouTube versus quote unquote traditional filmmaking, whatever. That is a skill that transcends whatever medium you're working on, like whatever platform you're showing it
Hmm.
on. Like that is just storytelling in its purest form. So, walk me through a little bit of those, like your editing style. And I know it
Yeah.
goes from video to video, but like how you approach different things, because I think that's something that you're probably most well known for in this community.
Well, thank you, first of all, man. That goes a long way for me because I put a lot of myself, I think, into those things. So
Yeah.
when, I hear that it totally makes somebody feel something, makes them,
Yeah.
emotional in any way, that's lifts me up so much. So thank you for that.
Mhm. Yeah.
But like, again, that comes from years and years of editing. And I guess just I think that comes from also like you're just always trying to find, I mean, it's the classic, like you're trying to find the story. It can't just be random
Yeah.
clips that are all of a sudden appearing. There has to be some sort of storyline that's happening. And, you know, with the videos about the Valley Folk that I've had on my channel, those were all, you know, I've kind of stopped doing any like personal videos for the most part because I'm just working for Valley Folk stuff so much. But, it's like those were the ones that you really do put a big part of yourself into those. And it really just starts off with like, I have this idea of that I want to explain what's happening, almost like the pin or the start of a story or the end of a story or something. You get this
Right.
one sort of feeling idea. And for me, it's like music. Music, I listen to music, and that thing, songs will just like freaking unlock something for me to where I'm just able
Yeah.
to like see something in my head like completely fully formed, almost like as I'm listening to something. And sometimes it'll veer away from that song if it starts to go a different direction, but a lot of other times it'll actually just be that song that is the groundwork for what I'm feeling, type of thing. And then I kind of, as I'm listening to a song, I'll just like kind of think about, you know, what's the story? Where does it start? What's the moments that need to hit hard? What's the, you know, and I use the beats of a song. I think there's certain songs that are like, and I think, you know, this relates just to editing. I think any editor would say there's a rhythm to what you do. It totally is like a song where there's fast parts and then it slows down and you have to find it and ease off and smooth it out. Like it's like it's an art, I guess, you know. And
Right.
trying to like encapsulate that or put that into video form is just like, I don't know, it's hard to like explain. It's hard for me to talk about the process because it happens so, it's one of those things that you do it without really realizing what you're doing. You go into a place and you're just kind of like, I'm just going to feel this out and see how it goes. I think you do have to have an idea. You do have to sit down and be like, this could go nowhere and this could be crap, but I'm just going to do what feels right. And then, you know, for me, I'm somebody who, as I'm working on something, I'm not like, this is amazing, I know this is so good. It's like, I'll work on something or edit something and I'll finish for the day and just be like, well, this is crap. I don't know how I'm going to do anything with this. And then the next morning, you know, you sleep on it, you take a step away. And I think that's another big key to filmmaking and everything in general is having something that you can totally step away from it. And that's difficult for us. But if you can step away, you kind of get a reset in your brain. And then I'll go back to it and be like, okay, this isn't as bad as I was saying it is. I'm going to make some tweaks here and there, and I'm going to do exactly what I did the day before. And then it's loosely that cycle until you get to a place. It doesn't always have to be the end, but you get a moment. You get something that happens in an edit that you feel it all of a sudden. You feel the feeling that you were going after when you started the project. And that's when you kind of know, okay, this is going to be something. And then that's where the excitement starts to kick in. And then you can kind of, depending on the length of the project, it'll either push you to the very end or you'll go another up and down type of feeling of like, oh, this is crap again. And then you get to another moment of making it work. But yeah, like, I mean, one of my first year video was such a big, that was probably, I've explained this to my friends and family, that was the first video that I've ever done that I had to, pretty much every time I went into that, working on that video, I told myself, you are about to be really sad for the next few hours while doing this. Be ready for that. And then just was sad. And I mean, I would have tears coming sometimes when I would be like finishing an edit or something because it was just very hard to make. But again, it's this feeling of like this, again, like we've been talking about, you want other people to connect to it. Want other people to relate to this feeling that like, this is this is what I'm feeling, and I'm sure you can feel it too if I do it in this. I don't know if you do it in this way, if I show you it in this way, and that's I don't. Yeah,
Well, it's so like I also really love how you interact with the audience, and you put out calls for people to like send you kind of interviews and like their own perspective on things, and like that's something that you did for the COVID video, which I have a short little cameo
you are in that.
Thank you for putting me in it. Yeah. In my apartment in Savannah, you saw a very raw video of me, and you saw a very raw video of a lot of people.
Yeah, that was when I was hearing all about blueberries, of how it all shut down and everything.
Oh yeah, that's how you know about it, is because I ranted about it for like 15 minutes to you.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Wow. But I think that is so interesting, is that you put out this call like, hey, tell me your thoughts on COVID, and this was summer of last year.
It was like the month after. It was like when we kind of realized this was probably going to go on until like June of that
so probably
year.
Like,
I think it was like April.
Like April.
May.
Yeah. And so like you said, that's the time we realized that this is not just a couple weeks thing. Like when it gets really serious, and like that's when it was really awful in New York and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And then you're like, all right, everyone, kind of spill your guts to me in a way. And I think that is so. One, it says a lot about how your audience feels about you, because they and I, myself included, felt comfortable enough sending that to you, like an unedited video.
That was such a big, weird, again, another just uplifting thing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the amount of submissions was insanely overwhelming to the point where I was just like, oh my gosh, how the heck am I going to do this? Because I was getting, I got like, 200 people sending in like, some of them were like 45 minutes long of them talking, and it was like I wasn't expecting I had to go through this much footage type of thing, which I was fine with. I think it makes for a better project, but that was I mean, I'm very just grateful for it. I can't, it's hard to process it fully still.
So whenever you're looking through all this stuff, like I feel like I could write a paper about how you edited that video, because I see stuff and I'm like, oh, that's like, I know what he is doing and it's awesome. Like I know the film, the behind the scenes filmmaker perspective of like why he chose that shot to use over this like piece of dialogue and all that kind of stuff. Like it's very well done. And again, this isn't to gas you up. I genuinely believe these things. It's so well done. I love that video. So how does the story evolve as you're watching hours of people talking about, for a lot of people, the worst time of their lives? Like that must have been pretty emotionally taxing.
It was, I'll tell you again, man, it was a similar thing where I wanted to make something involving the idea of COVID. I had no idea what that really was, but what I was noticing, I guess, and this was subconsciously, this wasn't really me knowing what I was doing, but looking back, in those first couple weeks in that first month, I think I was noticing that this sucks so bad and is so scary, but we are all in this together, and we're all having to deal with this. This is scary for everybody, every single person. It wasn't even just like a state or a country that was dealing with it. It was every single person in the world was struggling and scared and having to just push through this. And I think I was noticing, people putting out things that were uplifting and like, hey, just kind of like exciting. And I kind of took, not exciting, but like almost like a hopeful, like we can get through this. This is going to lead to okay things. And I mean, again, going back now, I had no idea what it was going to turn into. I think if I were to, if I knew ahead of time that the video would have been a little bit different than it is now. But I kind of took those two emotions, or all those emotions that I was seeing, just this was all through social media, and just, I think, thought like, I want to know what enough people, like what a majority of people are feeling about this. And that kind of thought, that kind of idea came as I was listening to music, as I was listening to like very slowish songs and kind of melancholy songs, really. And
Yeah.
the song that's in there is a song called 22, and it's like I heard that and then started imagining, like, okay, I'm hearing people talking about COVID. I'm hearing this kind of story of how this is
Mm.
all happening. And then that kind of lived for a couple weeks, that kind of idea, still kind of not sure what that was. These are all things that I just kind of write down and then maybe they get to something or not. And then
Right. Right.
I heard like a different version of the Beatles song Obla Di Obla Da, and when I heard that, it gave me such like a, hey, this is gonna be okay somehow we're gonna make it through this. And then I kind of just wanted to express all those emotions in a way. That was kind of when it hit me of like,
Mm.
once I heard that song and heard the 22 song, it was like I was seeing it again. It unlocked something to
Mm.
where I could see the storyline. I could see when moments would happen in each aspect of the song or whatever, in each verse or whatever. And
Mm.
I even like I do a thing where I'll put a song on a timeline and then just put a giant text layer and then just cut it up where I know I want beats to be, and then type in whatever the like a bullet point almost idea of things. And
Mm.
then it was like, okay, I need perspective. I need people to know what's happening here and again, that was coming from a place too of like everybody was now switching to these virtual things. They were all going to Zoom.
Right.
We were only seeing each other then through screens. We weren't seeing each other in person. So I was like, that's how the video has to be. It has to be via Zoom, because I could have asked people to like come over and interview, but like that's just a completely different thing. We wouldn't have been able to even do that.
Right.
And so, I sent out a thing on Twitter and Instagram and got so many just great messages and great videos. I mean, there's still so many videos that it hurts that they weren't able to be there. But,
Mm.
that's where the Cut the Babies idea comes from.
Yeah.
And then just like really just found moments that I was, I had written down. And then also, this is where you kind of have to give a little, this was again like the improv type of thing that I had been learning, like steer away from this plan, because this plan is going to be a lot better if you go a different way because of what these people are saying. And I think that there's parts of that definitely where like I had no idea that this moment was going to happen, but it worked out so well somehow because I switched it up
Yeah.
a little bit. And then, yeah, and then it just finally got to that play. That was another video of just like, this is hard to work on because this is like heavy stuff that people are dealing with. But it was that one, I
Yeah.
definitely felt good getting it out. Like that was one that was just like, wow, I'm really glad that I made that as kind of like a pinpoint or whatever in this timeline type of thing.
It's also like a really I wonder if you've thought about this. It's a really big like gift that you're giving to the people that submitted videos, because I had no reason to document how I was feeling at that time. I probably didn't want to. I
Yeah.
not until I was prompted by you. But now it's very interesting to go back and look at myself a week after or a month after my whole life and everyone's whole life
Yeah.
just gets turned upside down. And so that's like this sounds pretentious and like maybe too big
Oh,
than
no.
what it is, and I don't mean it to be, but in a way you're kind of documenting the history of the moment. Like
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm so yeah. I'm so glad I can go back and watch my feelings and just be brought back to that moment, because now that we're like over a year into the pandemic and like the vaccines are out and like there's some hope, but there's also some things that are like really not hopeful and stuff, that
Yeah.
it's truly is a gift to be able to go back and like watch that. So on behalf of myself and everyone that submitted, thank you for making that, because I think that is the, like, if you would have just made a video about your perspective, that's like one thing. But whenever
Yeah.
you incorporate your audience and your community, that is, I think, so honest and so real, and
Yeah.
like what we need to see more of these days.
Well, yeah, thank you, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
That again, like that was something that I did have to think about. Was, I was getting personal stories from every single person. I was getting like just their perspective of what was happening. And that was probably the toughest part of that project, is then how do I take their personal stories, how do I just extract the feelings and the emotions behind those stories and
yeah.
broaden it to where everybody will be able to understand this
Right.
overall feeling. Yeah, that was tough because again, like everybody had their own perspective, and even I had my own perspective, and it was trying to like, okay, that was again, I was assessing kind of like what is the overall consensus feeling of how this, because there's people that had stories out there that was like, this is wonderful, this is great,
Right.
I'm loving
Right.
this. And it's
Right.
like, I think those people still are out there, but I do think that the majority, and I think even those people would say that this has been hard. It's been a hard,
Yeah.
2020 was tough, and it's
Yeah.
still tough. And it just, trying to spread that we're all doing it. We're all here trying to get
Yeah.
through it. And we're just, yeah, it's a very trying to just, again, like kind of connect with everybody. Cause I think that really can keep you going.
Well, like you said, it was a very hard year. 2021 is hopefully going to be better. It's
Yeah.
always a roller coaster. It seems like we all just got on this ride on March 12th of 2020 and we haven't gotten off, and I don't see the end in sight. But looking forward, of course, eventually the Valley Folk is going to come back in the office,
Yeah.
and Dynamic Banter is recording in person again. I just
Person
started
again,
listening
I
to that
know.
episode today, which I'm so excited about. But we are quote unquote going back to normal, whatever that means. But as you look forward to this year, but really farther into the future, what are your big goals? What are what I like to call the North Star that is keeping you creating things?
You know what is so, you you caught me at a time in my life that has been very, very difficult to know that. And we all go through these moments. That's what I have to
Yeah.
keep telling myself of like, growing up, it really was like, I want to be able to make videos like on YouTube for a living.
Yeah.
That was kind of like, I want to do that. That would be so cool to be doing that. And then that happened. And then it was like,
Right.
um,
Yeah. You
okay, now
reached
what?
it at a young
Yeah.
age. Like that's yeah.
And then it was kind of like, now what? Now what am I striving for? And to get a little bit personal, luckily, I through even the Valley Folk, I found a wonderful girlfriend, and
Yeah.
she kind of showed me, or just has reinvigorated this feeling of like, hey, you don't have to have this huge end goal to enjoy your time here. Like, that was what's been so crazy about her, is that it was like filmmaking was everything. It was like YouTube was
Right.
like, that's all I just want to keep making stuff, and I don't care if I'm up all night doing it. Like, I just want to keep going. And she kind of like made me step back and be like, actually, I want to have a relationship with this person, which would involve like forming a life with this person. And then
Right.
that's going to mean I got to take a step back from a little bit of all this and think
Yeah.
about really what matters. So, like, I'll answer your question just to say, like, I'm still kind of after I love directing. I love kind of producing things. I love being on set to like film stuff. As much as I still love editing, this year has taught me that editing is definitely something I couldn't do full time, because I think that just being behind a computer for all of it is a little bit,
Right.
it hurts me. I like the idea of being on set and shooting things. So it's really just like continue to grow. I think that's one thing. I want to continue to look back. I mean, it's been hard this year, but look back each year and be like, hey, I'm doing a little bit better than I was the year before, and I'm feeling a little bit better about the work that I'm doing.
Hmm.
And then just, like just working on, I guess, myself, really. Like if I told you like my
Yeah.
goals right now, again, like it's hard to be like, I want to direct a movie or something right now, because really like
Hmm.
what I'm focused on right now is like just really, again, this year gave you a lot of self-reflection. It gave us too much self-reflection, which we
I
found
don't
out
want
that
to
you,
reflect anymore.
yeah, there's a balance you gotta find, of just like,
Hmm.
you know I think us as filmmakers, we fall into this mindset, and I think it is good, but it can hurt you, of being in that hustle grind culture, that you can't be ever satisfied with something. It's like I
Right.
hear so many people that's never feeling satisfied, and I think that that's something that I fell hard into without realizing that I did. And so really trying to like take a step back from that and being like, hey, let's just enjoy life as for what it is, as
Yeah.
opposed to like going after certain things and going after, and I feel like I'm like hating on goals now, but that's not what I mean.
No,
Like
not at all.
still like go after things, but I'm, going back to the perfectionism thing. It's like it's hard for me to not put 100% into everything I do. So it's like
Yeah.
trying to relearn that idea that is so ingrained into my head is something that I'm having to actually put a lot of focus on, because I know that like that's just going to make my life better, which will then in turn make my work better. I will be
Hmm.
able to like concentrate. It'll just be more fulfilling, I think. So that's my goals right now. Work on myself.
I'm glad I caught you in that, because I think, like I mean, I'm just gonna repeat what you said. We get so caught up in the career goals thing, like,
Yeah.
but there's so much more to life than filmmaking
Yeah.
and a job and all this kind of stuff, that I think one of the positives of this last year has been that changing in perspective. It really showed
Yeah.
me, like, not that family wasn't important to me. Family's always been really important to me, but
Totally.
I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is like all that matters. Like
Yep.
everything else,
It's
this is it.
below
You know what I
this.
mean?
It's below it. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And it should be. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like that's the order, like the order of priorities is it needs to be on that stuff. But
Yeah.
I appreciate the honesty, because I do think, I mean, I will tell you, my peers and I, my graduating class of 2020, what a time to graduate, first of all.
Ugh.
Like with a film degree. um
Yeah.
it we all feel, I shouldn't say all, a lot of the peers that I know and a lot of my friends feel super lost, because
Totally.
our
Totally.
world has been flipped upside down. So I think it's good to realize that.
That's something that, I mean, you would feel that even if it wasn't a pandemic. That's what's so hard about this
That's
stuff. It's like,
right.
like
Yeah.
yeah, you got, I mean, that's, also, I'll just say real quick with the whole goals thing, it's like a creative job, there's not going to be you're not going to know what path you're taking. It's going to just take you on a ride. It's going to literally, like,
Hmm.
I mean, that's what my whole job, it was like, what the heck is
Right.
happening? This isn't how I thought this was going to be at all. Like, this is
Yeah.
never, so accepting that you're not going to have control over how it's going to go, and just kind of riding the wave a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I totally get you, man. That feeling of loss is just so hard for so many people, especially creatives, because it's like, again, I think a lot of us have this like cloud of like, it's hard to put stuff out there right now,
Yeah.
because it's just still, everybody's in such a high alert anxiety, like everybody's just not feeling themselves. So it's like knowing that you're going to put a ton of work into something and give it to people that really aren't 100% there still. It's hard to get through that.
And it feels a little weird for all of these like really important things to be happening in the world, for me to be like,
Yeah.
I'm making a short film. You
Yeah.
want to see my short film?
Yes.
Like, because people can rightfully so be like, shut up. There's way more important
Yeah.
things happening right now. So Yeah, it's been a weird road to navigate, and I think a silver lining is that we're all navigating it. Everyone,
Yes,
even people who
totally.
aren't creatives, whatever, we're all figuring it out, and we will figure it out at some point. As
Yeah.
the best advice my parents ever gave me growing up is very simple. It's just, it's gonna be okay. And I
This
told my
too
friends
shall
that.
pass.
Exactly. Exactly. The sun will continue to rise. And that is the golden nugget of wisdom we will end this episode on.
Hell yeah.
Kevin, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been so fun. I'm so glad I got to tap into that part of my brain in this episode, because I haven't really
Yeah,
talked
man,
about it too
thank
much
you.
on the podcast. And it's a huge part of my filmmaking identity. And I think stuff like that is honestly the future of where film is going to go. So
It could be. We have no idea, man. But thank you. I mean, thank you so much for having me, man. I enjoyed it. It was fun.
yeah, absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you're listening to the audio only version, you should check out the video version on our YouTube channel. There's links to that in the description. But yeah, this has been super fun. There's links to all Kevin's stuff, all of Valley Folk stuff, Dynamic Banter stuff in the description. If you're unfamiliar with those people and what they make, I highly encourage you to listen to it. You will get a weird, like, you'll get kind of a look into Kevin and I's mind as how we are, and it might be scary and
Yeah.
might change how you think about us. But
But if
it's
you
the
like
way
it, then
is.
just know that you'll be our best friend.
Best friend. Exactly. This has been so much fun. You are welcome on the podcast anytime. I can't wait to see
Hell yeah.
what you make in the future and what the Valley Folks makes and all that kind of stuff. You're a friend of the show, and we'll be rooting for you in whatever you do. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Awesome.
This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. The next episode comes out Monday at 9 a.m., and we will catch you in the next one. Bye.